Hello again. Welcome to On the Spot. I'm here today with Samir Dedhia.
Dedhia.
All
Yep,
right,
you got it.
and we met in Vegas at a mixer, but I was there for summer league. He was there for somewhat work. He's in the mortgage industry. He's from Philly and out in Jersey. So the floor is yours. Go and introduce yourself, Samir. We'll go from there.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Steve, thanks for having me. And like, it's amazing. We just meet at some mixer, and all of a sudden, here we are, right?
Yeah, doing the
Almost a year ago.
podcast.
But yeah, I'm a CEO of OneReal Mortgage. Our mortgage company got acquired by Real Broker, the real estate company, and we've been integrated now with them for about 2 years plus. I live in New Jersey, originally from the Philadelphia area, so I'm a big Philly sports fan. Married for 21 plus years and have three boys.
Nice. So you ready for On the Spot and stuff like that? We can get the questions going. You good?
Yeah,
You
let's
ready?
do it.
All right.
Let's
All
do
right.
it.
So you being a mortgage person, what are your thoughts on the real estate market as far as rates and when you see the prediction and all that coming with everything happening now and stuff? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So look, I'll say we can never predict, right, Steven? So like I tell everyone, like no one has a crystal ball, and if anyone tells you they know exactly what's going to happen, they're lying, right? No one knows for sure. But we know that like mortgage rates, that's always the hot topic in the mortgage industry, are trending downward, but we're getting like little spikes. So if you look at it, like I always like to look at things as an aggregate, like all right, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, and the trend is going down. Like that's pretty clear. The question now is tariffs. Will that happen? Will it not? What impact will it have on inflation? You're starting to hear rumblings from President Trump talking about, he pretty much wants to get rid of Chairman Powell, right? Will that
Yeah.
happen? He obviously can't, but will he create pressure enough to have him step down, perhaps? I think there's a lot of volatility right now in the markets in general. You look at the stock market as well. Whenever there's uncertainty, I'll say, regardless, right, of whatever it may be, that's when you get people who are a little bit nervous. So I'm always a firm believer, Stephen, like when it comes to interest rates, consumers shouldn't be looking at rates. They should be looking at affordability and monthly payment. Now we know that the monthly payment comes from the rate rather, but I believe a lot of people get very fixated on the interest rate, not really knowing what the monthly payment will translate to. And, for example, I remember when rates were shooting back in 2023, they were going from like 3.5 to 4.5 to 5.5 to 6. Like they were going rapid fire, right? Rapid pace. And
Yeah.
people are obviously getting nervous, which I don't blame them. But when you ask the normal consumer, hey, like, what does that mean to you? Like, what does it mean from a monthly payment perspective? Most of them didn't have a clear understanding of what it meant. And and also, I mean, you being in the real estate space, you know this, but most consumers don't realize that there's more than one interest rate per product, right?
Yeah.
Depending on how much of a credit or how much you want to pay for a rate, you can really customize your options to whatever. So I would say I believe this is a great time for overall rates. And even if you do lock into a rate now, you're likely probably going to refinance. Most likely, we don't have a crystal ball. You're probably going to refi in about 8 months to a year, maybe even like shorter period of time, depending on what happens. But I would say overall, rates are trending downward. There's a little bit of uncertainty at the moment, but I believe things take a little bit of time to marinate. So I think we'll have a more clearer picture probably in the next few months as far as what's going to happen with rates.
Cool. Good perspective, thoughts. Now, let
Yeah.
me ask you this question. You want to share a struggle
Yeah.
you went through with work or, life?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like I'll kind of go back in time a little bit. I'll kind of go back to 2001. I graduated from Drexel University. I got a degree in finance and accounting. I did
Okay.
some internships at some at that time, as big four, big five CPA firms. So my thought at the time was when I graduate college, I'm going to go up the corporate ladder, right? And after I got married in '03 to my wife, we were, I moved up to the New York City area. I worked at Ernst& Young for about a good 3.5 years. And, I started realizing as I'm going through this journey of working in corporate America, and again, nothing is wrong with it. It was just more on what I wanted and my desires. I wasn't happy. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do in life, right? Kind of I had this vision in my mind, and I was really struggling at the time, Stephen, to figure out like what I wanted to do in life. And I feel like a lot of people based on decades, I've learned this now in my 40s, but like your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, it all teaches you something different pretty much, right? And there's different
Yeah.
evolutions that you go through. And in my 20s, honestly, I was just like, hey, I knew I wanted to go make money and make a lot of it. And I thought the corporate path was the path that I wanted. But what I realized as I grew, and even looking back now, just because you make a lot of money or you do well financially, if you don't enjoy what you do, it really is meaningless, right? Like you really have to find your
Exactly.
passion. And so what I started kind of stumbling across was like different things. And honestly, I got into the mortgage industry just by stumbling into it. And I think probably similar to maybe you, Stephen, like real estate mortgage, like we don't graduate college saying, oh, I'm going to go do that. It doesn't
Yeah.
happen.
No, by
And
accident.
I met an
Yeah.
interesting individual who had a mortgage brokerage company in New Jersey, and I started, talking to this person a lot. And he did tell me at the time that I could make a lot more money than I was making at the time in corporate. But I was like, okay, cool. Like, what does that mean? I don't know what it means to be in the mortgage industry. But I decided that, at this point, I wasn't enjoying what I was doing anyway. I started doing mortgages on the side part-time. I started liking it because for me personally, I was able to use a little bit of my accounting and finance background just to blend into my like networking capabilities and the ability to like talk to people, which I love doing. And I was able to blend the two worlds together, unknowing that that's what would happen, but I was able to do that. And I started enjoying it a lot more. I started getting success. And that struggle though, right? Like not knowing what I wanted to do
Yeah.
somehow helped me push to say, all right, I need to find out what I enjoy doing. Because there's nothing worse, Stephen, like than walking outside like every single day with this pressure on your shoulders just because you don't like to get up and do what you do every day. Like I think that's so looking back now, I tell a lot of younger people who are like aspiring to do something entrepreneurial, you
Yeah.
have to find your passion, right? Like it may take you a decade, 2 decades to get there, but
Yeah.
I'm telling you, don't chase money because if you chase money and you don't love what you do, it'll all fizzle out and it's really not worth it at the end of the day. So that was
You'll
one
be
struggle I
miserable.
think of that really changed the trajectory of my life just by stumbling across into this and finding out what my passion was and then taking it from there. And here I am.
Thoughts, good thoughts. Do you want to share us a quote? Do you have a quote that you want to share?
Yeah, so this is one quote that I live by a lot. And again, a little bit of like background back on me. My parents immigrated to this country from India in the 70s, right? They were working and whatever, and they knew that they eventually wanted to own a business. But they, again,
Yeah.
so kind of similar to my journey, like they didn't know what they were going to do. They ended up buying a motel 30 minutes north of Atlantic City. And I grew up in that motel, right? And
Oh,
every single day there was something going on, something you had to fix, something you had to attend to. And it was basically the family business. And I know a lot of people, like some of their parents have family businesses that we just, it doesn't become like a job, but it becomes like part of your family. Like you just, hey, I have to go help and I have to go work here and do things. And a lot of people do this. But and from that mindset, I always tell this to people all the time that if it's perfect, you're too late. If something is perfect, you're too late. And what I mean by that is a lot of us, we go on this mission. We go and try and figure out what we want to do. We want to build something, right? Even here at OneReal Mortgage, we're building stuff every single day. And I tell everybody, if you try and wait for it to be perfect, you're probably too late. Like if it's perfect, there's no such thing as perfection, to quite honestly, Stephen. But what I
yeah.
tell people is like the mindset is get it out to a reasonable level, whatever you're gonna launch. And then from there, you're going to have to iterate anyway, right? And there's nothing
Yeah.
better than user feedback, if you will. Like when you roll something out, you really need to understand what things you're going to change along the way. And so that's what one of the things I live by. If it's perfect, you're too late. Like that means that like you should have rolled it out probably years prior, you know?
Cool, good one. Let me ask you this personal question. What do you watch nowadays for Netflix? What favorite show you like on TV
Oh
that you
man, so
watch?
I wish I had more time to watch TV,
Yeah.
but I'm trying to like spend more time. So there's a couple of shows that I've recently watched.
Yeah.
One is called Adolescence. I don't know if you ever watched that. It's
No.
interesting to watch. Another one's All American, which it came out years ago. It's like a series on Netflix. But I'll
Okay.
say like the one I always go back to, man, is like not even on Netflix. It's on the History Channel.
Okay.
And the show that is on there, it's like there's the blank that built America, the men that
Yeah.
built America, the women that built America, the food that
Yeah.
built America, pioneers that built America, the mega brands that built America. And so
Yeah.
I'm a history, but I love history. For whatever
Yeah.
reason, I was always attracted to history because I love learning about the past and seeing the
Yeah.
impact it has on the future. Because I feel like there's nuggets that you can learn, right, in
Yeah.
history. So I always loved that. And one of the ones that I loved, like, were the food that built America, right? Looking at the innovation from the Industrial Revolution, the frontiersmen that built America, which was like prior
Yeah.
to the, right after the Revolutionary War, before the Industrial Revolution. So those are the shows I kind of nerd out, man. Quite honestly, I geek out on those things. But like, you learn so much about, entrepreneurial-minded people, right? And that's kind of what I am. So when I learn, like, wow, they really innovated something pretty cool, right? Like whether it's the railroad, whether it's opening up Pizza Hut, right? Whether it was creating Heinz, like all of these different things, I think tell you something. And it really, for me, it's like, all right, like my brain is always, Stephen, like an innovative mind. Like, how do I just innovate on what exists today? Like, whether it's mortgage, whether it's real estate, whether it's blending the two together. So I'm always like thinking like, all right, how can I make it better? How can I innovate this better? How can I make it a better customer experience? And those shows really kind of teach you a lot of those things. So I would say like those are probably like, aside from Netflix and some of the shows that I'm watching now, the history stuff always gets me where I can just sit there for hours and just binge, you know?
Yeah. You got a favorite history movie that you like? I know mine is I like Glory was good, and I know one with Brad Pitt with a tank movie was good. I forget what it's
Yeah,
called,
so
but
there
those
was the one that I still for whatever like I again like I love like the Vietnam War stuff. So Platoon was one that I love,
okay.
and Born
Yeah.
on the Fourth of July. I think that was Tom Cruise.
Okay.
So I like, it's interesting, man, that you asked this because I like the movies that are based on something pretty real, right? Like
Yeah.
not like the real fictional. They can have some fiction in it, but like maybe based on a character, right? Like even for example, when I was a kid, like watching Gandhi or some of these, like I'm a big like documentary, real life type of person. Like that's what I love
Yeah.
watching. And when they do movies around it, like Lincoln and all these other ones, I'm like, dude, that's like
Yeah.
pretty cool because I think with those movies, you read about stuff in the history books, but then you might learn something that you didn't even know about that person. And
Yeah.
like seeing them in real life and envisioning like them in that point of time, to me, that always gets me.
Cool. Cool. Good one. So who's on your Mount Rushmore of football players?
Oh
If you had to
boy.
pick, I mean, you're being an Eagles fan and
So
stuff, but
yeah, I'm a big Eagles fan. And so I grew up I'm 46. So I grew up in the 80s and 90s. But I
okay.
really remember more or less watching football in the late 80s, early 90s. And I I love defense. So even this year with the Eagles winning the Super Bowl, like more than how well Jalen Hurts or Saquon Barkley performed, I was
Yeah.
more in awe with how Fangio led this defense. Because I'm old school. Defense wins championships. That's what I believe. So for
Yeah.
me, I would say on my Mount Rushmore, I'm gonna pick two people. One person is Reggie White, number 92, the Minister of Defense, and
Yeah.
number two is Jerome Brown. Jerome Brown was like, even though he died at a very young age, I think he had so much more upside. But Jerome Brown was this like dog, we call it now in Philly, like these guys from the Georgia school, right? Like University of Georgia, they're dogs. Jerome Brown was a dog. Like he just went after people mentally and physically. So I think when the combination of you look at like Jerome Brown coming at you and Reggie White, quarterbacks were like, you know what? Like they were scared. And they're like, this is crazy. So from when I think of them, like, we had like fun players back on the offensive side of the ball, like Randall Cunningham and Keith Jackson and all those cats. But when I think of like the Mount Rushmore, it's definitely Reggie White and Jerome Brown.
Yeah. Cool. How about this? Who's the GOAT in football and basketball? Who's your GOAT if you had to pick one or the other?
So my GOAT, it's hard. So I'm gonna like forget about teams, right? Because I don't know,
Yeah.
like I think overall sports.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to look, regardless of what we think on the football side, Tom Brady was able to do things with no real weapons, if you will, right? Like he didn't have crazy weapons. The one year he had Randy Moss, fine. But if I look at like the GOAT, like that guy was able to figure out his offense every year and it was different, right? Like he's going like chunk plays, sometimes going deep ball when Randy was there. Like to me on the football side, like it's hard to say that Tom Brady is not the GOAT at this point. I love Joe Montana. I know you're from San Francisco, so
Yeah.
Montana was amazing. But if I look
Yeah.
at like what Brady was able to do with the limited quote unquote resources he had on the
Yeah.
offensive side of the ball, it's hard to pass up.
Okay.
Basketball's tough, right? Like I look at Michael Jordan, right, from my time, probably even yours as well.
Yeah.
He was
Probably more.
amazing,
Yeah.
but I think it's different now, man. Like in sports, like if social media was around during Jordan's time,
Yeah.
how much exposure will we have to him knowing what he was doing, right? We all know
Yeah.
he liked to gamble, whatever. So it's almost like it's hard, right? Like I think LeBron James, when I look at like versatility, he could play probably every position on the court for the
Yeah.
most part at a high level. And he was able, like I remember the announcement when he went to Miami and how like, dude, it was bad, right? Like he was getting killed on social and everywhere else. But he weathered through that storm, right? And I think in today's day and age, like even looking at like people like us or anybody, it's you got to have a lot of strength up here. Not that Jordan didn't. He probably would have been fine, but it's hard to say because we didn't know. We
Yeah.
don't know what would have happened. But for LeBron James coming out right out of high school, young age, weathering through the off the court stuff that he had to go through as well. It's hard to say, man. Like on and off the court, I'm probably leaning towards LeBron as the GOAT on
Okay.
the basketball
Wow.
side.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
All
And
right.
I'm not, I'm a Philly fan, so I love the Sixers. I love Dr. J. I love all those cats. But
Yeah.
it's a different time in sports where there's a lot more exposure. So you're dealing with a lot of crap.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Good one. Let me ask you this. During the pandemic, what's something that you
Yeah.
did before that you didn't do before that you picked up maybe and start and use now or do?
The Peloton. So
Okay.
probably like many people, everybody was hitting the Peloton. I think the Peloton
Right.
stock went crazy that time.
Yeah.
And I was
Yeah.
always a runner, right? But
Okay.
as I was getting older, running would hurt my like lower back a little bit more than usual,
Yeah.
right? And I'm like,
Okay.
crap, I'm like sitting here, wine
Yeah.
deliveries are coming every few days, right? Beer deliveries are coming. I think everyone's trying to figure out what's going. The mortgage industry was going crazy because
Yeah.
rates were falling. You're like, what is happening? And you couldn't really leave the house, at least here in Jersey. Like it was like I was luckily I mean I have a single family home, so I wasn't like a condo or anything, so it was a little bit
Yeah.
easier for me to just walk outside. But still, like we weren't seeing people, especially early on. So my
Yeah.
wife ordered the Peloton. I was like, man, what is this? I don't do this spin stuff. Like what the hell? And I was like, you know what? Let me just try it. So I did it. I'm like, oh, not bad.
Yeah.
And every day I'd make it a habit to maybe around like 4:30, 5 o'clock in between calls. I just go hop one for a quick 30, 40 minute ride. And
Yeah.
honestly, man, like I do that still to this day. Like I'm riding
Yeah.
probably 3, 4 days a week, and I
Wow.
also go to the gym, I work out, and I lift. But like that even 20 to 30 minutes, that clears my mind so quickly. Cause
Yeah.
like it's not like which I didn't realize earlier when I was doing it. I'm like, oh, you're riding a bike. Like how hard or how crazy could that be? Unknowing what really spin was all about. And when I got on a spin bike, I'm like, yo, this is crazy. Like I was like hurting in places that I didn't even know existed. And so for me, like it's something that I picked up during the pandemic where I'm like, all right, this is something that I can probably do. And now we have a Peloton obviously in the house. I go down to the basement. I'll do a ride in the morning when my day gets
Yeah.
started. And I'll just kind of like clear out my mind because I think like especially in the position I'm in, I need a fresh mind every day,
Yeah.
right? And I'm not like dealing with clients as much as I used to anymore. It's more like dealing with our team and figuring out how to build. And so
Yeah.
like as we get older, what I realize the mental like strength is so much more important now than the physical. But like with the Peloton, I feel like I can kill two birds with one stone. I can be in pretty good shape and I can clear the mind very early in the morning to start my day.
Cool. Good one. First time with Peloton. It's good.
Yeah.
Who's your instructor? Do you remember what instructor you had, or you just been?
I like to move around a little bit. I like to have
Yeah.
variety. Alex
Okay.
Toussaint was probably my first instructor that I was like using a lot because I'm a 90s hip hop guy. Like I love my hip hop, so I'm
Yeah.
always looking for good hip hop music when a ride comes. So Alex was early. Leanne Hainsby, she does some cool stuff too.
Okay.
Those are probably my two main. I'll use like Jess King and others as well, but I would say
Yeah.
Alex and Leanne are probably the two that I go to quite often.
Okay. There was that one girl that was pretty good on there that she left just recently. You know who that was?
Oh, I don't remember.
There was a,
There was I know Robin was a big one. She was like an early person that joined.
okay.
Oh, there's so many now.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, but those are yeah.
Okay. How's this? What is your dream car?
So it's interesting. I'm not a big car person, but
Mhm.
I always liked cars. And I was never like a power car person. Like I need like a
Yeah.
Lamborghini, Ferrari. Right now I have a Lucid, which is great. I love it. But I would say
Yeah.
like early on, I was probably like the Maserati was like
Yeah.
one of those like Maserati or the Bentley, and more for the aesthetics and the look of it. For
Yeah.
whatever reason, I always enjoyed those like the cars from
Yeah.
that perspective, just to look at and have. But yeah, wasn't really a car person. I've driven in like Lamborghinis and Ferraris and other cars like that. It's cool. Like,
Yeah.
look, some people love the speed, but here's the reality. I live in suburban New Jersey. Where can I really go and use that car and whip it around? Probably not
Yeah.
many places, right? And if it's low to the ground, I'm probably gonna have busted tires. I know I sound like an old man right now,
Yeah.
but it's really like I'm more like, all right, let me get something like luxury that I can use and enjoy while I drive it, and as
Yeah.
opposed to like trying to gun it from 0 to 60 and figure out how fast I can go,
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's kind of like in Oakland. There's a lot of potholes, and people get these,
all the time.
Corvettes, or I'm like, you can't drive them fast because the roads are terrible, and or you're gonna,
Exactly.
but yeah, so you might as well
Yeah, like if I go
go some.
locally here, Steve, and drive up and down, like especially after the winters sometimes we get, which are like pretty
Yeah.
cold, the blacktop gets completely crushed. Like it's all over. And like so you to your point, like even around town, like okay, what am I going, 30 miles an hour? So like
Yeah.
I'd rather have something that has some gadgets, some features, things I like. And honestly, the Lucid, I wasn't big into electric cars.
Yeah.
And they had like a pretty good deal at the end of 2024. So I'm like, you know what? I'm in for a new car. I need to get one. Let me go and just try this. And what I loved about Lucid, I've never driven a Tesla. My brother-in-law has one, but the
Yeah.
Lucid has a lot of nice features, right? It kind of feels
Yeah.
like a luxury car inside, as opposed to like just something that just has very simple like simplicity. And for me, when I like have cars, like I want like nice little gadgets, and it looks like nice and clean, and that's kind of like how I go with cars.
Cool. Yeah. So next question, talk about Lucid. What are your thoughts on the EV car? I know they're big now, coming out. I mean, what do you think
Yeah.
about? with that and
I,
just like
I
your
actually like
experience.
at first I'm like, EV, whatever, who cares? They're damn convenient. Now, I will preface it to say, if you're going on longer drives quite often, I still don't think it's like practical. Quite honestly, like my
Yeah.
wife, for example, like we drive, like we have three boys who are like two freshmen in high school. I have twins who are freshmen in high school, and a third who's in eighth grade. They're
Yeah.
into sports, right? Basketball, soccer, the whole nine. And there's a lot of driving that happens. And granted, we can charge the car at home, but if we have to go on like a long trek to like Hershey, Pennsylvania for a tournament,
Yeah.
I gotta plan properly, right? I gotta look for charging stations along the way. I gotta allocate like an hour, hour and a half, whatever it is. It's not like going to fill
Yeah.
up gas. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love it for me because like I'm like every day I kind of like drive locally for the most part, but I
Yeah.
can see still it being a pain. Now, I think as time progresses, I do see the value in it. I think they are awesome, right? Like they feel good to drive as well. You don't have to worry about brakes and engines and all these other things that you normally have to worry about. Batteries, and battery you have to, but engines you don't have to. So
Yeah.
I think in the future, like if they open up more and more, stations like electric stations like everywhere across the country, like how we have gas stations here, I think they'll
Yeah.
be huge. But I'm assuming in San Francisco, right, compared to where we are here in Jersey, there's
Yeah.
probably a lot more charging stations and it's probably easier, right?
You think so, but they're coming around, but they're still like not as many because they're slow ones. So like there's
Yeah,
ones that take
yeah,
like 2 hours or so not it's not like it is like gas you can roll, but I had experience. I had one like a loaner, and I got
yeah,
the whole experience. I had to find where to go, and you're like, what are you gonna
yeah,
do? And
yep,
the cars
yeah,
go a certain speed, and so you're cringing
yeah,
and like for here, people that try to go to LA, that you got to charge up before you go over the grapevine, and so
yep.
it's
No,
just yeah,
it's true. So it's interesting you say that because like when I first got my car, it's like, oh, Lucid has 405 miles from,
yeah,
for a full charge. I'm like, oh, 405 is pretty
yeah,
good. And then we had a pretty rough winter here. It was cold. So I'm using
yeah,
heat. I'm using heated seats, heated steering
yeah,
wheels, and I'm down to like 270, 260, right? I'm like, crap, like this is like
yeah,
crazy. And so before I got my charging like units at home installed, it was the same situation where I'm like, I gotta go somewhere to like a mall. I gotta plug in. And I'm like, all right, what do I do for an hour and a half? Like, I
yeah,
have nothing to do.
yeah.
So it's like, yeah, that part I agree with you. You're right. Like until it can get to a point where you can charge in like a couple minutes, it's gonna be
About 20
hard to kind
minutes,
of
yeah, yeah,
even 20, right? Like I think even
yeah,
20, you're right. 20, 15 to 20 minutes is still reasonable. When you're
yeah,
talking like hours, you're like, dude, I barely
yeah,
have enough time in the day. Like, how can I sit there for two
yeah.
hours and wait for my car to charge?
Yeah,
So
there's
yeah.
not too many. You're waiting behind people, so I felt I was waiting. It was cool. I met some new people, but yeah, it's just unless you have the charger at your home, I feel it's you need that.
No. But even there, right? Like again, like if you're as long like I'll give you an example. I recently went to Washington D.C. There was an event, right? And I'm
Uh,
like, all right, maybe I'll drive. It's not too bad, I'll drive. But then I'm like, wait a second, dude. Like, I gotta figure out the charging situation going there and coming back. Like, I gotta know where to go, how long I can sit. And then to your point, if someone's there, I'm gonna have to wait longer. So I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm just gonna take the train and take a
yeah,
train down to D.C. and that was it. So that's the one thing I'll say. Like, I love it. When I drive it, it's awesome. But to plan things, it's
yeah,
definitely a little bit challenging.
cool. All right,
Yeah.
let me ask you this: what age would you go back to and live at if you could go back in time? What age would you live at?
Boy, that's a good one. So I always am kind of like either senior year of high school or
Yeah,
senior year of college.
okay,
And I think, it's weird. Like any journey, when you start something, you're still getting your bearings. You're trying to
yeah,
figure
yeah,
it out. And then you get into a groove. But the challenge with high school and even college, once you get into your groove, it's time to go.
yeah, yeah,
And I tell this to a lot of people. I tell it to my kids. I'm like, you really should enjoy your school life so much more because you think homework is challenging. Like, wait till you get into the real world. Like, it's hard, right? And not in
yeah,
a bad way, but it's like it has like many challenges that you can't just always go to mommy and daddy to help fix, right?
yeah,
And so when I think of it like the last year of high school, the last year of college, I met like I got into my groove. Like I had my good set of friends. We figured out like where we wanted to go. We're kind of having a lot of fun. Even in school, like you're getting into that groove with school as well, like managing because I played sports as well in high school, like managing your sports life and your school life, and you get there,
yeah,
and then it's time to go. And I'm like,
yeah,
crap, now I got to start over again. And then so I would say when I think back, like that was like a lot of fun. I met a lot of amazing people, and a lot of people. Thank God for social media, Stephen. Like because like now I'm able to keep in touch with so many people still from high
yeah,
school, from college. Like our parents didn't have that opportunity. It was like going to those reunions every single year and or every single 5 years or 10 years, whatever it was. But now,
Yeah.
like, you kind of can keep in touch with everybody and see what's happening with everybody. Not that I'm like close with many people from those
Yeah.
times, but you're kind of just still in touch with people, you know, and especially for someone
Yeah.
like you or I, who's like in a client services business where people need a home, they need a mortgage. You always want to kind of be present with people,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
Totally. Yeah. 100%. Totally agree with that. Thoughts. So, you got a favorite field trip that you did as a kid that you went on?
Wait, say that one more
Like
time.
a favorite field trip that you experienced as a kid? Did you go on those? Like,
Yeah. So one of my favorite field trips was in the eighth grade. And so in eighth grade, we went down to, I'm pretty sure it was Washington, D.C. or Baltimore Harbor. So up here in the
okay.
East Coast, man, like that's the usual like eighth grade trip. And it was like
Yeah.
you take a bus down for the whole day. You go to like see all those sites and whatever, right? And like Maryland, like D.C. area was always the most popular
Like,
place to
how far
go.
is it? How far is the trip
Yeah.
to get there? A couple
So
hours, something?
it's about from where I was in southern New Jersey at the time, it was about 2.5 hours to 3 hours
Okay.
max. So it
Okay.
wasn't bad, you know. You hop in the
No,
morning, you
no.
go. But the reason why it was so memorable was again my eighth grade year, end of like another journey. But my
Okay.
dad came with me, and it was interesting. So my dad, like he came to this country in the '70s, like worked his butt off, right? Just like my mom, they worked so hard. And he could never make it to a lot of my things, right? Like whether it was a
Yeah.
baseball game or a basketball game, because he was always working, trying to provide for the family. And that day he took off. He's like, you know what? Like I'm gonna be the chaperone. Like come and chaperone and be with you for the trip. I'm like, awesome.
Yeah.
And it was so cool to spend the whole day with him because honestly, I wasn't able to spend the day with him that very often because even in the motel, there's always something to do, right?
Yeah.
So this was like a time for us, he and I, just to unplug and have fun with each other. And like he
Yeah.
could meet my friends, he could meet my friends' parents. They're having a good time hanging out. We're having with the kids having a good time hanging out. So that was like a thing that I still like. It's amazing when you think about it. I was 13 at the time. I still
Yeah.
haven't forgotten that moment where he was there for that moment to be there with me the entire day. And that meant like a lot because I know like for him too, I'm sure he wanted to be at these things. He couldn't manage it, right? And he's like, I just got to keep providing. And this was a time for him like, I'm off today. I'm going on my kid's class trip, you know?
Cool. Good memory right there. Good memory.
Yeah, that was a really good memory.
So, what generation did you grow up in? I'm guessing, are you millennial or Gen X?
So I think I might be Gen X or Gen Z, right? I'm born in '79,
Oh
so
yeah,
I'm
so
not
you're right in
sure
the
what
Gen
that
X
means. Yeah,
era. Yeah.
yeah, I'm a
Yeah.
Gen X, right? Yeah, so I'm
Yeah.
kind of like, I feel like I'm
Yeah.
right on the border. So it's funny, right? When I talk about like Gen X, Gen Z, Gen Y, one of the
Yeah.
things I think about a lot is like perspective on things.
Yeah.
So I always believe, and I'm kind of going to dive in a little bit to building things, if you will, right?
Okay.
So when
Yeah.
when I look at Real Broker, for example, or OneReal Mortgage, like I'm always like I look ahead, right? I
Yeah.
guess like as entrepreneurs or innovative minds, like I like to say, hey, what are the next generation of people going to want,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So when I think of like the home buying experience, for example, I think of my kids who are 15, 13, whatever, right? And they're
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
be buying probably in 10 to 15 years. So how do you create an experience that helps them and makes them want to do it? Because as you know, and especially in our space, real estate's not fun. Like most
Yeah.
people don't want to do it, but I always kind of like make myself like part of every generation, if you will.
Yeah.
Like I like to learn and like be a sponge like for like what people are doing and saying and what's happening. Again, I'm not perfect. Like I'm not involved on like TikTok or other platforms that my kids use, but I like to understand and learn. So, early on, something funny that I tell people like when my kids were probably in the sixth grade, seventh grade, around that time frame, I
Yeah.
would drive them to school every day. And it's not far. It's about a 10-minute drive, right? Five
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
10 minutes. And I would pick up one of their friends. We'd go and drive to school. And it's interesting. I would just listen to their conversations. And I'm like, wow, like that's interesting how they look at this. Like, for example, I learned that that generation, they don't use text messaging or iMessaging as much. They communicate on Snap. And I'm like,
I
how does
know.
that make sense? It doesn't make sense to me. But like,
Yeah.
why? But then I think, you know what? Like, there's a lot of things that I did that didn't make sense to my parents, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
even though what they do doesn't make sense to us, we should learn why they're doing what they're doing because that
Yeah.
gives us that knowledge to really kind of mold or build something that they could benefit from.
Yeah.
And like I tell people, it's always like when you build stuff in general, it's always not about building what you want, but it's about building what other people want or what they'll
Yeah.
use and what they'll need. So
Yeah.
like when it comes like the generational stuff, like I'm always intrigued by that because I think you can learn a lot from every generation, right? Like even the
Yeah.
folks from like Generation Y, I guess, right? Like the ones who were like during the Great Depression or whatever. I don't know what generation that is, but even the Great Depression, like they went through some crazy times and they built a lot of amazing things from that time period when you went through the Great Depression. Like there's things that you learn
Is
from
it
that
Silent
generation.
Generation? That's 1925. That might be before that.
Oh,
Maybe.
what is it? The Forgotten Generation?
A Silent? Is that
Silent,
1925?
maybe the Silent. Yeah, it
Yeah.
might be that one.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I always forget. There was a book that Tom Brokaw wrote about that generation. I forgot the name of it now.
Yeah.
But it was really about the generation that survived the Great Depression. And that generation went through hell and back probably, right? And
Yeah.
you had all kinds of things happening where like people are really struggling to just live. But like, and then you look at like my parents' generation, our generation. Like what generation are you or what year were you
I'm
born?
a millennial. So yeah, I'm in the millennial generation.
Okay.
So
Yeah, so even like for me, like we probably have some commonality in certain things, but there's certain things that you do that maybe I wouldn't have done or I didn't do when I was growing up. But then it's important for us to like understand each other. So in general, I tell people like this is like a life lesson, if you will. Like everybody comes from a different perspective. So it's important to understand everyone's perspective and where they come from. Like there was a book that I read called To Kill a Mockingbird when I was in 8th grade. And one of the common themes that came out of the book was put yourself in the other person's shoes. And so if
yeah.
you put yourself in the other person's shoes, you're going to understand their perspective. And you
Yeah.
might not agree with their perspective at the time, but you have to understand where they're coming from. For example, even for us, client service, you're going to find some clients that maybe aren't the nicest people, are not the happiest, chipper people, that are
Yeah.
going to probably knock you down a couple times, but you have to understand why they're acting that way, right?
Yeah.
And what you can do to kind of like help mitigate that. And so that's why I believe that with the whole generations thing, like it's interesting, like there's so much you can learn from every generation.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. So with ChatGPT now we got technology and stuff and the kids get it
Yeah.
earlier. What are your thoughts on that as far as with, going forward with the technology and stuff we have?
Yeah, so it's, I always believe technology doesn't replace the human connection, but it creates efficiency in
Yeah.
everything that we do, right? So even here on the mortgage side, like I tell people, we're building a lot of technology here at
Yeah.
OneReal Mortgage. That doesn't mean that we're going to get rid of people, right?
Yeah.
Like we're trying to like figure out how do we use everyone's strengths to the best of their ability.
Yeah.
And I feel like technology is a huge driver of efficiency in general. So when we think of technology, everyone talks about AI, right? And I think there's very many platforms of AI, right? You have Perplexity, you have OpenAI, ChatGPT, you have, what is it, Google LM, like Notebook LM. You have so many
Yeah.
different platforms out there. The one thing I tell people to do is make sure the information's correct, right? Like don't just take it at face value. Figure out where I use technology a lot right now is administrative tasks, things that I would ask maybe an assistant to do, things that I don't like, hey, can you like go on and research this and I'll read it, right? Like chunk it down. Like I actually teach my kids how to use ChatGPT effectively, not to what's the word, plagiarize, right, or take information to make their work easier, but to really make themselves ready, right? For example, one of the things that I taught my kids was, hey, when you're studying for a test, you have your study guide and all this information, right? But what if you could go into ChatGPT and create 5 different sample tests for you based on specific information? Use it, right? Make yourself ready. Like look at different perspectives. I use it a lot to help me with content creation, right?
Yeah.
To research certain things I'm looking for. Again, you got to make sure it's authentic. But what I find is with AI, which is pretty amazing, is that the more you put into it, the more it learns about you and how you conduct and what you do. So now, for example, OpenAI knows that I'm the CEO of OneReal Mortgage. It knows some of my thoughts and how I conduct myself and what are things that are important to me and all of the things that I put into it. So now when I'm asking it a different question, it'll take all of those pieces and put it in its perspective and deliver information to me that maybe I would want to digest it in, right? So there's so I think there's a ton of benefits. And look, here's the thing. I believe mortgage and real estate especially are 2 industries that need something like AI. Because a lot of the conversations are very similar. The processes are pretty much the same for the most part, right? But the only variable is us, the human being. So if we, and eventually you can probably even create a little bit of that. But if we think about it, humans are still buying homes, right?
Yeah.
So humans are still going to want to rely on another human being to talk to. When they go visit a home, when they have questions about something, AI is not going to be able to help that interaction get tighter and tighter, which is, I believe in sales, it's all about building relationships. Like that's the biggest thing I've learned in life. Like when you can build really solid relationships, like that's really the essence of sales. And
Yeah.
so, but the AI, if someone came to you and said, well, I'm looking for a home here, what type of things are like, you could probably plug that into ChatGPT and digest it, but you can deliver that information. Now you can deliver the information in a way that will resonate with your consumer. ChatGPT
Exactly.
can't, right?
Yeah.
It can't. So,
No.
and it's not going to make you feel warm and fuzzy inside. So I
No.
always tell people leverage the tech to help you get better at what you do, learn more. Sharan Srivastava, who was he's a good friend of mine, huge real estate mogul and icon. He tells me, and I haven't done this and I want to do it, but he tells me he goes into YouTube every single day and he'll watch something about AI for 10 to 15 minutes. That's it. And so even him, like, and others have, Neil Dingra, right? Like he's huge on AI. Certain people really like are disciplined with that, and they're figuring out how to embrace something. Where I feel like many people, they get scared of something new. When something new comes out, they're like, man, like it's gonna take over and replace me, and they're thinking of all the negative things. But
Yeah.
instead of thinking of those negative things, why not be like, how can it help me, right? I mean, think about this. I'll never forget in the 90s, AOL came out, America Online. You plug in the phone line into your router or whatever, like the modem, it
Yeah.
dials up the internet. You go
Yeah.
online and you're like, oh, wow. Now, my parents, back to the generational thing, they're like,
Yeah.
the world's over. Like, we're going to have robots everywhere, right? That's what they thought. But that didn't
Yeah.
happen. What happened was we were able to just get information faster and deliver information faster and learn faster. So, look, regardless of your thoughts of like, whether or not it's the world's moving too fast, it doesn't matter what we think. The world is moving fast. And if we don't adapt and adopt certain things that will help us, we're just going to get left in the dust. And I think in our industry, especially, if you're not using AI for anything, if you're not learning how to make your life and your work more efficient, if you're not learning how to make content and delivery more efficient, you're just going to be left behind, just like when the internet came out. So I look at AI right now as like when the internet came out, right? Except
Yeah.
it's not going to take 20 to really go crazy. Like when AOL versus when Google came out, it was a good 10 year to 12-year horizon. This
They
is
had
just moving
Netscape
out.
before all that, and Netscape
And
AOL,
that's
right? They came out. And,
exactly, yep. So now you're talking about the timing just is going to move quicker and quicker and quicker, where it's not going to be years, it's going to be months. It's not going to be decades, it'll be years. And that's kind of
yeah.
like what you have to think about. But I love technology in general.
Yeah.
And I believe always that you still need, like, I'm a great networker. I mean, we met, right? Just at a random mixer,
Yeah.
but I'm a great networker. And if you're a great networker and you care about the other person and you know how to build relationships, technology is never going to take you away. But you have to figure out how technology will help you drive those relationships further, right?
Yeah.
So,
Good points. Good thoughts on that. Let me ask you this last movie question. What's your recent movie you saw that you liked or thought was good or bad
oh boy,
recently?
what movie did I watch? Hold on, let me think about this. Recently, the recent movie I watched. So I'm big into sports movies. So it's an older movie, all right, so it's not
Okay.
brand new, and I don't
Okay.
really go to I haven't been to the movie theater in years, because I don't have the time. I would love to, but the most recent movie I watched was with my kids. So my kids and I, we try and make it a point when we're home on the weekends to just watch, and they love sports and I love sports, so I'm like,
Uh,
whatever sports movies I can find. And Netflix now has Draft Day with Kevin Costner, and I watched it a while ago, but I watched it again, and I'm like, holy cow. And when I think of Draft Day, they're like, Dad, he's like Howie Roseman from the Eagles. I'm like, no, I know. He's just wheeling
oh,
and dealing. So like for us, like that was the most recent one I watched. I mean,
okay.
I watch a lot of shows. Like I think the other thing I always have a hard time with is like watching longer movies, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to do more of now, to be honest with you, is more get into more and more like audiobooks. And
Okay.
like so we created like a book club at OneReal Mortgage where a bunch of us will hop on and like read different books, like
Yeah.
motivational books. There's a book called like Who Not How. I don't know if you read that one. That's a
Yeah.
good one. So a lot of my time now when I'm at the gym or working out, when I put my AirPods in, I'm just like reading, like doing audiobooks just to
Yeah.
gain, because like it's easier for me now. What I realize is when I read a book, like physically read a book for me personally, I end up like zoning out. And
Yeah.
I don't read it all, I don't absorb it. But if I'm listening, I'm going to remember more of it. So to answer your question, like not a whole lot of movies recently, a lot of shows, like I mentioned on the history stuff. Draft Day is probably the most recent one I watched. I just watched it again after a long time with my kids.
Yeah.
But I'll say like one of my favorite movies though from back in the day is
Yeah.
Back to the Future. And again,
The
like
first
I could
one.
watch that over. So I actually like the second one more than the first one. But then I
Yeah.
like the third one also because I like the whole like futuristic when the
Yeah.
cars are
Yeah.
just flying around. Like I love watching just what people thought in those days.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know. Those are like some of the movies I like to watch.
I think they're due for another one. I think they need to do another one. I feel like,
Yeah.
and see what
I
they.
wonder who, like, obviously I don't think it's gonna be, it's not gonna be Michael J. Fox, I believe, because
Yeah.
he's Parkinson's, whatever. But like maybe it's someone like who's like now his kid, right? Who's like,
Yeah.
yeah, that would be an awesome
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah. Totally. Let me ask you this: Are you an Apple or Android guy?
So I was Android for a long time. My PCs are all like, Microsoft, normal stuff. But I,
Yeah.
I did get into the iPhone. I was sucked in to the iPhone probably about a year and a
Okay.
half ago.
Wow.
And what I'll say is, man, the Apple technology is amazing. It's so intuitive. It's so easy to use. I remember when I had to turn my phone on and start programming it to use it. They're like, yeah, just turn it on. I was like, what are you talking about? And then they're like, oh, like I got AirPods and I got an iPad. Like, yeah, just turn it on and you'll just sync everything. I'm like,
Yeah.
this is crazy,
Crazy.
right? Like,
I know.
yeah, it's crazy. And like, I'm sure Android can maybe do it, but I'm an Apple dude now for sure.
Yeah.
I actually respect Apple a lot. Like their technology is very, very user friendly. What I tell everyone, even my kids, like you have to make things applicable to like a fifth grade or third grade reading level, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I believe simplicity is so important in everything that we do. If you simplify things, people won't feel overwhelmed and people will
Yeah.
want to do it, right? But if you make it so overcomplicated, people won't want to do it. And so, when I think back to real estate and mortgage, like one of my missions in life, and it could take me 15, 20 years to get there, excuse me, but one of my
Yeah.
missions is to be able to take a home buyer from the time they sign a contract to ready to close, like clear to close, in
Yeah.
7 days or less, a week. It shouldn't,
Okay.
honestly, in today's day and age, take more than a week to transact. But there's so many parties, appraisal, inspection, real estate agent, mortgage professional, title company, everybody's involved in this one transaction that inherently, and of course, it's going to be slower, right?
Yeah.
Everyone doesn't work at the same speed. So I look at that, I'm like, there's got to be an opportunity for us to be able to simplify the real estate transaction, especially because, again, the crazy thing for me that I think about all the time is why 20 years ago when I first started, it was 45 to 60 days to close a deal. That was like the norm,
Yeah.
if you will. And now it's only 30 to 45. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. Like
Yeah.
in 20 years later, we've only shortened it by 15 days. How does that make sense, right?
I
With
know.
all the technology out there. So as long
Yeah.
as you can simplify things in an easy to understand way, I always think that every experience and everyone will want to do it in general if it's simple, but it has to be simple.
I'm gonna pause real quick. Hold on. I'm gonna Let me ask you this question. What's it? You want to share a tip of the week, life tip, business tip you want to share with the people, the listeners out here?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to think here real quick, so hold on a sec here. So one of the tips, a life tip, a life lesson, whatever you want to call it, is, and so Rocket, and I just spoke about this on one of my reels, but Rocket has they have a bunch of isms, right? And one of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
isms is numbers and money follow, they don't lead.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think the biggest mistake that people make is that they go chasing something based on the amount of money that it can possibly make for them, right?
Yeah.
And which is not always a bad thing, right? We all need to make money. We all want to make money. But I feel like when a lot of people look at an opportunity, right? Career change, something maybe entrepreneurial that they want to open up, they focus on how much money they can make.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you do that, typically you fail.
Yeah.
And the reason you fail is because you're so fixated on the money that you forget about what you're trying to solve. So whenever you're trying to do something, and anything it is that you're trying to do, think to yourself, what am I trying to solve? Would I enjoy something like that? Because I believe the passion is what's going to drive you forward,
Yeah. Yeah.
not the money. If you do really well at something, the money's going to eventually follow. But if you end up focusing only on the money, I believe the flame will always fizzle out. Because let's think about it realistically. You could do many things in life and you can make a lot of money,
Yeah.
but doesn't mean you enjoy it. So if you look at a lot of people right now, even people in our industry like mortgage and real estate, you find that they jump from one company to another, right?
Yeah.
Every 6 months to a year to 2 years, they're jumping. And the reason they're jumping isn't because the money, because the money is an easy solve, right? If someone's paying you the most amount of money, you're going to stay there no matter what.
Yeah.
If that's truly what makes you happy. But we all know, right, going through our lives and our journeys, that the money's just a byproduct of something. It's a number, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're going to really want to enjoy what you do and stay where you want to be, because I believe most people don't want to keep jumping in life. They don't want to keep
Yeah.
hopping from one thing to another to another. They want stability. But stability only comes when you really do what you love doing and what you're passionate about, not trying to chase money. So that's one thing I tell everyone. Really focus on what you enjoy doing, what you love, not the money. The money will eventually come if you love what you're doing.
Yeah. Good thoughts.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. Here's one. If you could sit down and eat with somebody, who would it be? Dead or alive?
I would say Steve Jobs. So Steve Jobs is interesting, right? Like his whole life, his journey, like what he's done, what he's built. And again, there's a lot of great, like, Bezos and others, like great, like entrepreneurs that are out there. Steve Jobs went through a lot of ups and downs like many entrepreneurs do. And, even from being kicked out of his own company that he built, right? And then eventually coming back. And I think a lot of people, like, I would love to sit and just pick his brain just to understand, like, what were some of the things going on through his mind? Because it's very easy for us to build something, have an ego about it, and then all of a sudden think that we're the best. And then you get punched in the face. And I think everyone in life, like, there's a time in your life when you're going to be riding high, everything's working, and something goes wrong, and you're humbled, right? So I always like talking to people who have been humbled in a way where, like, all right, whatever, like, that's kind of like what they did, and they've learned from it. What do they learn from it? Why do they learn? How do they learn? All of those different things. So that's one thing I always like to focus on is, like, people who have done that. But Steve Jobs is interesting because, again, back to the simplicity piece, he made very simple products, and his mind went to simplicity more than like an overcomplicated, phone or an overcomplicated device. Like, he tried to put everything in one device. That's it.
Yeah.
He didn't try and give you 10 different devices to buy. He's like, just put it all in one. Just have one device to use it for everything,
Yeah. All right. Cool.
I got to hop probably in the next like minute or so. So I just want to give you a heads up.
Okay. Okay. Let's see here. I'll go code couple.
Yeah.
If you're stuck in an elevator, who would it be?
If I'm stuck in an elevator, definitely still Steve Jobs. Like, that's like, and the thing with him is, like, I'm always a person who doesn't like to ask people questions. Like, I like to ask. I don't like to, like, vomit information on people and be like, oh, I'm doing this. What do you think about this? I like to just learn from people, right? So even, like, hell, it could be even previous presidents from the past. But, like, when I look at, like, my life and, like, what I like doing and what I enjoy, Steve Jobs is someone who was like, man, if I could sit in a room with him even for 5 minutes, I'd probably learn so much.
Okay. Who would you want to nominate for the show to be a good guest to be on here? I could reach out to, maybe get him on the spot. Who would be?
Yeah, let me think here. Have you had, I think there's so many people that I know. I don't know have you, from our network, I'm trying to think, like Neil, Arjun, Sharon, like other people, like, have you talked to any of them?
Not yet,
No?
Yeah.
There's a
Couple
have you
of them.
ever met, like, Kofi Narte?
No.
He used to be a Compass. He's at Real.
Okay.
He's on the luxury side.
Okay.
He might be a cool one. He has a really cool background. He was a former NFL player only for a little bit. He got injured during, training camp, and then was out pretty much. But he's well connected. So he's at Real. He leads our, like, luxury division.
He's
He was
up
at Compass
in
before. But he's in the Bay
East
Area. I
Coast?
think he's in the Southern California area,
Okay.
if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
But he might be a good one. So I'll talk to him.
Okay. Cool. Let me ask you this. Favorite sports team and player? I know you're a big Eagles guy, but who's your, favorite player?
So right now, my favorite player, I would say current state, is got to be Saquon.
Okay.
And not because he's like a monster on the field, but what I loved about Saquon coming from New York is, look, great running back, really, really good, right? He knows this stuff. Even in college and even coming into the draft, like, it didn't work out in New York. And maybe that humbled him. I don't know him personally, right?
Yeah.
But with him, like, looking at how he came into an existing team with a lot of star players, right?
Yeah.
And he's just learning from everybody. Like, he's just trying to adapt, like, what do I do here? What do I do there? Like, at least that's what we see on the field, right? Like, he seems like a pretty humble dude. I like humble people. I don't like people who are egotistical and think they're the shit. But in general, I love him for that because he's a beast, right?
Yeah.
And even the fact that when he could have broke the rushing record, I'm sure he wanted to, but he took one for the team based off what the coach wanted to do and just said, you know what, fine, I'm okay with it, right? And he just did what he had to do. So I like him. I like him right now just because, dude, he's a young kid. I think he's great for kids to watch. Like, dude, you could be great and you could be helpful as well, and you could be a good role model, right? So that's what I love about Saquon.
All right, go on. How long have you been a homeowner for, and what do you like about the city you live in?
So I've been a homeowner now we bought our first home in 2005.
Okay.
So it's about 20 years. And, what I love about the city I live in now, it's giving me what I need. And what I need is like a little bit space, peace and quiet, not
Yeah.
a lot of hustle bustle, a little bit kind of farmlandish, if you will, but I'm
Yeah.
not too far from the Jersey Shore beaches. Not that the Jersey Shore beaches are great, but
Yeah.
in general, like it's kind of nice being in front of water. I think water is very calming for the mind.
Yeah.
Like honestly, the town that we're in is a smaller town, but like you have a lot of younger professionals, kids that are, similar ages to my kids, and it's just a great like environment to kind of raise our family for the next chapter of where we're trying to go. Obviously good school system and all those other things which are important. But for
Yeah.
me, it's all about the community, right? The community you live in really defines and molds you into who you are.
Yeah.
And more for my kids, how do I get them in an environment where they'll grow, right? Learn from people, grow from people, hopefully have lifelong friends that
Mhm.
will impact their lives for the years to come.
Cool. One. If you weren't working in the industry of real estate, mortgage, what would you be doing for work?
So I love consulting and coaching. I don't do it formally, but I
Yeah.
always I feel like my journey has been interesting from the time I was a baby till now. I've been around all
Yeah.
kinds of people and met a lot of people and learned a lot.
Okay.
I love mortgage, obviously, but I think there's a lot of people I could help, maybe even in the mortgage industry, people who are trying to open up businesses, people who may not even know from a mindset perspective, like, hey, like I have these challenges. I don't even know how to deal with work and family and everything else in front of
Yeah.
me. I feel like I can offer some good perspective and help to help people. And that's what I love doing. I love helping people. I love even my kids, like coaching them. I used to coach their sports teams. I used to try and help them with schoolwork, like whatever I can
Yeah.
do to help people. Like that's what I enjoy doing.
Okay. Good. So also coaching. Got it. You got a favorite video game or board game that you played or?
Not a video game, wasn't a big
Yeah.
video game kid, but I
Yeah.
love Monopoly.
Okay.
As a
That's a
young kid,
favorite
I
on here.
loved
Yeah.
especially because I'm a Jersey Shore guy, like from the Atlantic City area. That's where I grew
Yeah.
up. So
Okay.
having the whole Park Place, Boardwalk, Baltic, all those streets
So
that
that's
were
all.
familiar
So
to
that's
me.
So that's Atlantic City then. Okay. I didn't know
All
that.
Atlantic
Okay.
City, yeah, all Atlantic
Okay.
City. So it was cool, but then I loved the whole moving money around, the real estate piece, and all that
Yeah.
stuff. It was fun as a kid.
Yeah.
I haven't, now that I think about it, I don't even know if my kids have ever played Monopoly.
Yeah. We should play
So
this
now,
weekend. Yeah.
maybe this weekend, I might have to bust out the box and open it up and play with these guys. But I loved Monopoly as a kid. It was my
Cool.
favorite game.
I don't. You got a favorite emoji or GIF that you like sharing with people?
So I usually always do this, the
Yeah.
hand emoji. The folded hand
Yeah.
emoji.
Yeah. The prayer. Yeah.
Because for whatever reason, I'm always humbled by people, and I
Yeah.
always am thankful for people, and so I always like appreciating people. So for me, that emoji is like, oh, thank you so much. Like I really appreciate you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that's the emoji I like to use a lot.
Okay. How about a bucket list? You got something on the bucket list you want to do?
Nothing that comes to mind on the bucket list because, I'm always a person that likes to say, hey, like whatever comes my way is going to come my way. Whatever's meant to be is meant to be.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's not like, oh, I would there's many things I would love to do. But as I get older, honestly, it's like just spending more time with my family and meeting
Yeah.
really cool people, right? Like yourself. So it's like, how do I just continue to network and meet more people? So I wouldn't say it's like a bucket list, like I have to, like I want to do it before I die.
Yeah.
Because honestly, like life has been really good to me.
Mhm.
I've met a lot of amazing people. I have a great family. I have great
Yeah.
things. So it's just constantly being around people that can help me grow is all I really want to do in life.
Okay. And then how do we find you and stuff on social media and get your handles out there so people can follow you and reach
Yeah,
out
no,
to
it's
you?
a great question. So on social, I'm pretty much everywhere. So Samir Dedhia. So SAMIRDEDHIA. You can find me on LinkedIn, on Facebook, even on Instagram. My handle on Instagram is Mr. Dedhia. Those are
Okay.
probably the best places to find me because I'm on there quite a bit. I put
Okay.
out a lot of content.
Yeah,
I
I
try
see
and
a lot
help
of
and
reels.
educate people
Yeah.
there.
Mhm.
But obviously, if you ever need to email me, my email address is Samir. So my first name dot last name at one spelled out
Okay.
ONE real REAL mortgage.com. I'm pretty accessible. You can hit me from every angle, and I'm pretty responsive.
Yeah.
As you know, we talk pretty quickly, like pretty frequently. So
Yeah.
anytime that anyone needs to get in touch with me, I like to respond pretty quickly and not leave them waiting. So anything I can help people with in general,
Yeah.
I'm here as a resource.
Okay. Cool. And then if you got any questions about the mortgage, you can reach out to Samir and stuff and real estate. Any thoughts? Always here to help.
Yeah. Always here to help.
From here on the spot, we're out of here. And we're on Spotify
right.
and YouTube TV or YouTube. So, it's On the Spot with Steve Lenz, hosted by me. So, for On the Spot, we're out of here.
All right. Thanks, Steven. Nice. Hopefully that was good.
Yeah.